Well, with me now in the studio to discuss this are two mental health experts, Dorcas Gwata, who is a global mental health analyst, and Dalia Majongwe, who evaluates mental health programs in Tanzania, Egypt, and Burma. Thank you very much indeed to both of you for coming in. Start with you, Dorcas. Why is it important to mark World Mental Health Week?
Well, Charles, thanks for having us. It's important. When we look at the challenges that we have in the world, and those challenges are escalating. We've got a lot of migration. The theme this year was to mark psychological emergencies, and that reflects on the migrations that we've seen around the world, particularly across Africa. Now, you might think that the biggest refugee camp is actually here, but actually there's a lot of internal migration in Africa. That impacts hugely on women and children, where men move away. So in the wake of the Ebola crisis, for instance, we're still picking up the pieces from that crisis. The recovery process takes a long time. So we've got a lot of challenges with the secondary effects of HIV, which is still, the burden is still being picked up. But we mark this day to also celebrate the progress. We've made incredible progress, and a lot of innovation has gone into mental health with looking at reducing brain drain and using community healthcare workers to actually deliver cost-effective interventions in communities.
Right, and as Dorcas mentioned there, Dalia, there is a lot of concern about mental health, particularly in Africa, particularly among women. How widespread is the problem?
It's particularly widespread, and it's not so much just a rural problem or an urban problem. They both face different challenges. The problem in a rural setting is that when things go wrong in a family setting, the men migrate into the cities, but the women are faced with the problems of, children being sick and not having education, not having enough food. So that's the problem. If women could have more cultural support, society does not want to see a woman break down and say, well, I'm depressed, or I feel distressed about the situation. My husband's not here and I have to pick up the brunt. So it's one of those things where culture comes into play. And just in general, they are more vulnerable. They don't get the support that they need from society, from the government, and so they have a bigger issue to deal with, not just for themselves, but in a community setting.
And of course, as you mentioned, Dorcas, there are also health problems beyond just mental health that are associated with this stress. What have you observed?
Absolutely. So we're seeing, Charles, and you'll know that there's a growing middle class in Africa. That growing middle class, we call it the pot-belly economy, is that there are secondary effects. We have a lot of diabetes, we have a lot of high blood pressure, all of these illnesses which people do not seek early health. Now, this is where we get it wrong. We just don't seek early health. So you're seeing very unhygienic, unhealthy eating habits in middle-class societies. And for the very poor, you're just seeing people who are not accessing health early enough. So there are secondary effects, which just complicates the mental health dynamics much, much more.
And of course, it's not just women who suffer from mental health, is it? I mean, men also have a similar problem. What can be done to protect people in Africa against mental health problems?
Well, it is to identify that women face different mental health outcomes to men, because women, they also suffer from postnatal depression. And as a cultural concept to grasp in a society, we need to identify that. Men also have pressures about being a man. Manhood in Africa has become a bit of a shaky subject, and so that's one of those things. We need to identify the points at which mental health can deteriorate, and then also make different programs to cater to those needs.
Right, so presumably lots of education about mental health will help. How can it be done?
Particularly around substance misuse. Now, what we're observing in the continent is a growing substance misuse prevalence in young people. One of the best interventions I've seen in Africa, right across Africa, is that we all have mobile phones. So if you put your interventions on a mobile phone and you put your health promotion on a mobile phone, that tends to be a lot more receptive. But wherever there's an opportunity to be in contact with anybody, we must promote health. And again, we're seeing a lot of innovative methods of scaling up that health. But Charles, we still have work to do. The burden of mental illness in the continent is still very high.
So lots of work to be done. Are you hopeful?
Yes, very much so. I think we have to also start from the governments and their institutions, find out how they are handling issues around mental health, and then start from there, build from there, and then also integrate with innovation. So there is a lot of hope. Globalization is one of those things that are helping. In one of my evaluations in Tanzania projects, you know, it's trust from the NHS going to Tanzania to look at substance misuse interventions and making sure that they're effective, making sure the community is involved. So just making sure that all the practices we know here and everything that's proven and tested can go to Africa and make a change.
Okay, Dalia Majongwe and Dorcas Gwata, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having us.